Hello.
Hi.
Nice to be with you today for our daily reflection. And this is taken from the YouVersion Bible app, verse of the day. Today from Psalm 55, verse 22.
Cast your cares on the Lord and he will sustain you. He will never let the righteous be shaken. Interesting verse.
That's a big statement.
It is a big statement. How do you deal with that one? You got questions?
I have questions.
You'll
never let the righteous be shaken.
Have you been shaken?
I feel like I've been shaken.
Even
Does that mean
now?
I'm not righteous?
Yeah, well, I think you were just reading a moment before about the context. This is the Psalm of David, and David says, verse 16, "As for me, I cry to God, and the Lord saves me. Evening, morning, and noon I cry out in distress, and he hears my voice. He rescues me unharmed, and from the battle waged against me, even though many oppose me."
So that would feel like David is being shaken.
I would have thought that was being shaken.
Yeah.
Enemies raging around you, feeling distressed, lying awake at night. Oh, I feel a bit shaken by all those sort of things,
Jesus
don't
being
you?
on the cross, all those things.
Yep.
So, and yet in Psalm 22, it says...
Or later on in the Psalm, same Psalm.
Verse 22. He will never let the righteous be shaken. So tell me what that means, Stephen. I'm a bit confused.
Well, I suppose I would go back and think about the most righteous person that ever lived.
And that's Jesus.
And that's Jesus. And was Jesus shaken? Well, when we normally think of shaken, we would have thought dying on a cross. I think he probably
being betrayed by his friends and arrested illegally, all that.
Saying to God, "God, why have you forsaken me?" Or "Can this cup pass me?" It feels like that's shaken. So maybe David's talking about a different sort of shaken than what we think about. Because ultimately, Jesus' faith and trust in God and the righteousness of God was vindicated. God raised him to life again. So therefore, in that sense, his faith in God was secure. His foundation was secure, and that was never shaken. So maybe that's what the verse means.
So maybe talking about
God's faithfulness.
I still can't get my head around it.
God's faithfulness. That is, if we hold on to God and trust in him, even in the midst of death, even in the midst of the most difficult things that we go through in life, that faith that we have in God, God will sustain it, God will vindicate it, God will bless it, God will raise us to life again. And so therefore, God's purposes will never be shaken. They always hold
So
firm.
it's more about a faith stance.
Yep. Well, that's what
not being shaken.
And that's what David is talking about, obviously, in this context, because we've just said, well, feels like he's shaken.
Feels
so
like he's in the midst of death and turmoil and trouble.
So he's saying, I'm going to trust in God. I'm going to hold on, even in the midst of being awake at night, even in the midst of all the enemies, and I will not be shaken. That holding on to that, God will look after me. And I think that's the best way to interpret this verse.
Yeah. I mean, because it can feel like the world's shaking. You know, we're in the middle of a global pandemic, and this is not within our own living memory. So it feels like a huge historical moment that we're in, and yet God's saying the righteous will never be shaken. I will not let the righteous be shaken.
God's purposes will be fulfilled. God will work it all out. And if we continue to trust in God in the midst of this moment, then God is saying he will watch over us. He will look after us. He will care for us. And that doesn't mean to say that it exempts you from difficulties in life. Didn't exempt Jesus, so it's not going to exempt us. Didn't exempt David. But it does say that God will actually hold us together. He will grant us his peace. And we can know his security as we move ahead. I don't know. It's a hard verse, isn't it?
It is a hard verse, but good to remember that God's faithful in the middle of all your troubles, and that he is the one who's not shaken. I think that's probably what I can take away from that. God is not shaken by our troubles. We can rely on him and trust in him, and that's where our solidity comes from, I suppose.
So, the first part of the verse, cast your cares on the Lord and he will sustain you. Good words for this point in time. Let us cast our cares on Jesus, on God and what they've done for us, and God will sustain us.
Good thought.
Yeah.
Thanks. See ya.
Bye.
Bye.